When the cameras stopped rolling that day, nobody could believe what they had just witnessed. The silence on the Mission Impossible set was deafening. Tom Cruise lay motionless on the concrete, his body twisted at an unnatural angle that made even the most experienced stunt coordinators turn away. What started as another routine day of death-defying stunts had just become Hollywood's most terrifying near-death experience. But this wasn't just about one man's brush with mortality. What happened next would shake the entire film industry to its core. It was 3:47 p.m. on a scorching Tuesday afternoon in London. Tom had already completed 17 takes of the helicopter sequence, each one more dangerous than the last. His co-stars watched from behind the safety barriers, their faces etched with concern that grew with every attempt. The insurance companies had been calling all morning, their panic evident in every urgent message. But Tom Cruise doesn't listen to insurance companies. He never has, and that's exactly what almost killed him that day. "Cut the safety lines," Tom had demanded just minutes earlier, his voice carrying that familiar tone of absolute determination. The stunt coordinator, Marcus Reed, a veteran of over 200 action films, had never heard such a request. His hands were shaking as he looked at the harness system that was the only thing standing between Tom and a 150-foot fall onto solid concrete. What Marcus didn't know was that Tom had made this decision for a reason that would later shock everyone on set. The helicopter blades were spinning at full throttle, creating a windstorm that made it nearly impossible to see. Tom was supposed to grab onto the aircraft as it lifted off, hanging suspended in midair for the iconic shot that would become the centerpiece of the film. It was a stunt that professional stunt doubles had refused to attempt. Insurance companies had called it suicide masquerading as entertainment. But Tom Cruise saw it differently. He saw it as the moment that would define not just his career, but his entire existence. As the helicopter began its ascent, something went catastrophically wrong. The safety cable that Tom had insisted on removing wasn't the only protection he had secretly eliminated. In the days leading up to this moment, he had been making modifications to the stunt that nobody, not the director, not the producers, not even his closest friends, knew about. His personal trainer had noticed bruises on his arms that Tom claimed were from practice runs. His assistant had found medical documents in his trailer that she wasn't supposed to see. And his ex-wife Katie had received a phone call the night before that she would later describe as the most terrifying conversation of my life. The helicopter lurched suddenly to the right, 80 feet off the ground. Tom's grip on the metal landing skid began to slip, his fingers fighting against the force of gravity and the downdraft that felt like a hurricane. Below him, the film crew watched in horror as their leading man, the face of one of Hollywood's biggest franchises, dangled helplessly in the air. The pilot, Sarah Chen, a former military aviator with nerves of steel, made a split-second decision that would either save Tom's life or end it forever. But what happened in those next 30 seconds wasn't just about survival. It was about a secret that Tom had been carrying for months, a medical condition that his doctors had warned would make stunts like this potentially fatal. The tremor in his left hand wasn't from adrenaline. It was from something far more serious, something that could end his action hero career permanently if the studio executives ever found out. Just as his grip was about to give out completely, Tom made a choice that defied every law of physics and common sense. He let go. For 3 terrifying seconds, Tom Cruise fell through the air, his body spinning uncontrollably as the ground rushed up to meet him. The camera crew, still rolling despite their shock, captured every moment of what appeared to be the end of an era. Christopher McQuarrie, the director, later admitted that he closed his eyes, unable to watch the man he considered a brother plummet to his death. The sound of the impact echoed across the entire set, followed by a silence so complete that even the helicopter blades seemed to whisper. When Tom hit the ground, His body rolled 3 times before coming to rest against a stack of safety mats that weren't supposed to be there. How they had appeared in that exact location at that precise moment would become one of the most investigated incidents in Hollywood history. The security footage from that day mysteriously disappeared within hours. The paramedics who responded to the scene signed non-disclosure agreements so strict that they couldn't even tell their own families what they had witnessed. Tom wasn't moving. Blood began to pool beneath his head, staining the concrete in a pattern that the cleanup crew would struggle to remove for weeks afterward. His pulse was barely detectable, his breathing so shallow that the on-set medic initially feared the worst. But as they prepared to airlift him to the hospital, something extraordinary happened that would change everything everyone thought they knew about Tom Cruise. He opened his eyes and smiled. "Did we get the shot?" were his first words, spoken through lips that were split and swollen. The paramedics stared in disbelief. According to every medical principle they knew, Tom should have been unconscious for hours, if not in a coma. His injuries, a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and internal bleeding should have left him fighting for his life. Instead, he was asking about camera angles and whether they needed to do another take. Dr. Amanda Foster, the emergency physician who examined Tom at London Hospital, would later testify in a closed-door hearing that his recovery was medically inexplicable. His broken ribs were already beginning to show signs of healing just 6 hours after the accident. His concussion symptoms disappeared overnight. The internal bleeding simply stopped, with no medical intervention whatsoever. When reporters pressed her for details, Dr. Foster's only response was, "Some people are just built differently." But that wasn't the most shocking part of the story. The real bombshell came 3 days later, when the film's insurance investigator made a discovery that sent shockwaves through Hollywood's elite circles. Tom's fall hadn't been an accident at all. It had been carefully calculated, precisely planned, and executed with the kind of mathematical precision that only someone with extensive military training could achieve. The safety mats that had saved his life had been placed there by Tom himself, in the middle of the night, hours before filming began. Security camera footage from a neighboring building captured Tom arriving at the set at 2:30 a.m., 3 hours before anyone else. He spent 90 minutes positioning equipment, measuring distances, and testing wind patterns. He had turned what appeared to be a catastrophic accident into the most precisely executed stunt in cinema history. But why? Why would Tom Cruise risk everything, his life, his career, his legacy, on such an elaborate deception? The answer lay in a manila envelope that was found in Tom's trailer, sealed and marked with instructions to open only if something goes wrong. Inside was a letter that revealed the truth behind his desperate gamble, a truth that would explain not just the stunt, but years of increasingly dangerous behavior that had worried his friends and terrified his family. Tom was dying. The medical reports hidden in that envelope painted a devastating picture. A rare neurological condition was slowly destroying his motor functions, starting with the tremors that he had been hiding from the public for over a year. His doctors had given him 18 months before the symptoms would become impossible to conceal. His action hero career, the foundation of his identity, would be over within 2 years, maybe less. The stunt wasn't just about getting the perfect shot for Mission Impossible. It was about proving to himself and to the world that Tom Cruise could still defy death, even as his own body was betraying him. It was his way of going out on his own terms, as the man who never used a stunt double, who never backed down from a challenge, who never let fear dictate his choices. But the story doesn't end there, because what Tom discovered in that hospital room would change not just his life, but the entire landscape of action filmmaking forever. Dr. Foster's inexplicable recovery report had caught the attention of someone far more significant than just the hospital administration. Within 48 hours of Tom's accident, representatives from a classified government research program arrived at the hospital, demanding access to his medical files. The program, codenamed Phoenix Protocol, had been developing experimental treatments for military personnel who suffered catastrophic injuries in the line of duty. Tom's rapid healing wasn't just unusual, it was impossible according to conventional medicine. His body had somehow triggered biological responses that the Phoenix Protocol scientists had been trying to replicate in laboratories for over a decade. They offered Tom something that no amount of money could buy, a chance to not just survive his condition, but to emerge from it stronger than ever before. The treatment was experimental, dangerous, and completely illegal for civilian use. It required Tom to fake his own death, disappear from public view for 6 months, and undergo procedures that had never been tested on anyone with his specific medical condition. If it failed, he would die alone in a secret facility, with the world believing he had perished in a stunt gone wrong. If it succeeded, he would return with capabilities that would revolutionize action filmmaking forever. Tom took the deal without hesitation. The next 6 months were officially explained as recovery time from his injuries. In reality, Tom was in a classified medical facility in Switzerland, undergoing treatments that pushed the boundaries of human enhancement. When he finally returned to Hollywood, the changes were subtle but undeniable. His reflexes were faster, his strength had increased dramatically, and his fear response had been essentially eliminated. The tremors were gone, replaced by a nervous system that operated with machine-like precision. The first person to notice was his stunt coordinator on the next Mission Impossible film, Marcus Reed, the same man who had watched Tom fall that day in London, observed his star performing feats that should have been humanly impossible. Tom was jumping further, running faster, and executing complex maneuvers with an accuracy that made even veteran stunt performers look clumsy by comparison. It was like watching a different species, Marcus later confided to a close friend. Tom had always been exceptional, but this was something else entirely. He wasn't just performing stunts anymore, he was redefining what stunts could be. Hollywood took notice immediately. Other action stars began demanding access to whatever treatments Tom had received. Studios started budgeting for more extreme sequences, knowing that Tom could now safely accomplish feats that would have killed him just a year earlier. The entire industry began shifting toward more practical effects and real stunts, moving away from CGI because audiences could sense the authenticity of Tom's enhanced capabilities. But the enhancement came with a price that Tom hadn't anticipated. The Phoenix Protocol treatments had eliminated more than just his medical condition. They had also suppressed his ability to form deep emotional connections, a side effect that the researchers had failed to mention during the consent process. Tom found himself increasingly isolated from his children, unable to experience the paternal bonds that had once been the most important part of his life. His romantic relationships became impossible to maintain, as partners sensed an emotional distance that Tom himself couldn't understand or bridge. The man who had risked everything to save his career discovered that he had sacrificed the very relationships that made life worth living. The stunts became more spectacular, the box office numbers reached new heights, but Tom Cruise, the person, was slowly disappearing, replaced by something that was undeniably superhuman, but questionably human. Industry insiders began to whisper about Tom's transformation. Close friends noticed that his laugh sounded different, his eyes had lost a certain warmth, and his conversation had become oddly mechanical, despite his maintained charisma. Journalists who had interviewed him for decades reported feeling like they were talking to an extremely sophisticated artificial intelligence rather than the passionate actor they had known for years. The truth about what Tom had become would remain Hollywood's most closely guarded secret, known only to a handful of studio executives, government officials, and medical researchers. To the public, he remained the same death-defying action hero, But those who knew him personally understood that the Tom Cruise who had fallen that day in London had died in more ways than one. And yet, despite everything he had lost, Tom continued to push the boundaries of what was possible on film. Each new Mission Impossible movie featured increasingly impossible stunts, each one a testament to his enhanced abilities and a reminder of the price he had paid to achieve them. He had saved his career by sacrificing his humanity, becoming a living symbol of the lengths to which someone will go to maintain their identity in a world that demands constant evolution. The accident that was supposed to end Tom Cruise's career had instead transformed him into something that transcended traditional celebrity. He had become a myth, a legend, and a cautionary tale all rolled into one perfectly executed stunt. Hollywood had gained its greatest action star, but the world had lost something irreplaceable in the process. The vulnerable, passionate man who had once jumped on Oprah's couch out of pure joy. Today, when Tom performs his death-defying stunts, audiences around the world hold their breath in anticipation. What they don't know is that the man they're watching is no longer capable of the fear that makes such moments truly dangerous. He has become the perfect action hero by sacrificing everything that made him human, a trade-off that would have been unthinkable to the Tom Cruise who once believed that love was more important than fame. The cameras keep rolling, the stunts keep getting more spectacular, and Tom Cruise continues to defy death with superhuman precision. But late at night, in the privacy of his empty mansion, the enhanced man who was once Hollywood's most passionate star sometimes wonders if the price of perfection was worth paying. The answer to that question remains locked away in a classified file, somewhere in a Swiss medical facility, along with the last traces of the man Tom Cruise used to be.